We are coming to you today with the prison principle of winning the battle against bitterness. Bitterness affects every one of us. It's a tool that the enemy uses to make us look at our situation in a way that is not honoring to God. It's real easy in this moment when we're in a situation that we didn't choose to become bitter. And we become bitter not just in the situation, but we start to say, and some of us do, we'll say, well, why didn't the president do this? Or how come the media didn't tell us about this? Or how come this person that was sick, how come they didn't quarantine themselves? Or how come they didn't? And we start to say all of these things, these bitter statements. And as soon as we start to question what other people do, and as soon as we start to think about others' mistakes more than we think about our own sins, bitterness has a garden in our soul, and it starts to grow. We are examining the life of the Old Testament hero Joseph. Joseph was a godly young man whom God gave a vision that he was going to be a great ruler, and his siblings hated him. They took him and they faked his death. They sold him off to slavery, and they told their family, his brothers told the father, that he was dead. And he was thought of as dead. He was put in prison. He was put in a slaver's jail. And he was put in the king's prison, which is even worse. And he kept getting these snapshots of hope in the midst of despair until finally he finds himself imprisoned for over a decade for something that he didn't do, a crime that he didn't commit. Now, I want to give you a passage of Scripture where Joseph speaks about how he was there not by his own fault, and how he was set up, and how his brothers were jerk faces, and how the king was, terrible, and the leaders are terrible, and how the prison conditions are bad. I'm going to share this passage of Scripture with you, but I can't because it doesn't exist. Not one time in Joseph's life do we see him blaming other people for his circumstances. Not one time in Joseph's life do we see that while he's in the middle of trying to honor God with his circumstance in prison, that he takes the low road and blames everybody else around him. No, we don't see that at all. And so what we see is him trying to make the best of a dark situation, using the favor that God had already given him and giving him the power to look past his circumstances and look to what could be in his future. That's why his life matters to us where we are. I know you're not where you want to be. I know that we can look at blaming and looking at what's going on and looking how the government could have done better and what the business owners that we might be working with could be doing to help us and what all that. We could sit there and do this all day, but is it adding anything? I mean, really, is it giving you hope? It's not. And what it's doing is it's poisoning the work that God is trying to do to get you to lean on his favor and to lean on the hope that he gives you. So we encourage you to remember that talking about others, talking about things that are beyond our control, talking about how bad things are and how bad things were handled, which led you to this place, will only sow seeds of bitterness in your heart that will only hurt your ability to heal and walk with God through this process. Hebrews chapter 12:15 gives us a very, very strong warning. He says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, and that no root of bitterness springs up, causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. Bitterness is our quickest way to take away the work and the perspective that God is trying to pour into our lives and to replace it with fear, anger, anxiety, resentment, and everything else that the world is currently offering. As the church, we are to be a shining light in the darkest prison. As the church, we are to be the redeemed that always have a new song to sing because we serve a God whose kingdom is not of this world. We serve a God who is willing to say, you might be in prison, you might be in quarantine, you might be worried about your health, you might be struggling with this, but I know the end of the story and you are mine. Jesus gives us the ability, the unbelievable ability, to take what others have done to us and to take the things that society might have done to us and to take the things that the economy might have done to us and turn it into an offering of praise to God, because no matter what, his love for us, his devotion to us, and his willingness to walk with us through every step of despair is unshakable. It's unmovable, and we have access to it right now because Jesus gave his life so that we could live and so that we could be free. Free from sin, free from death, free from fear, and free from the burdens that everyone else is bearing alone. Jesus said he would give us rest for our souls. Our prison principle says it's our job to battle bitterness. Don't become bitter, but instead rejoice. Rejoice that you might be alone physically, but you are not alone. Your God has gone before you. He's holding you. He's watching over you. So even if you're in the prison, this is not the time to talk about how you got there, but instead talk about the God that can take you to the palace.